Hey guys, this is Marcel, Ernie Racing News, part 2 of Seymour Hersh and his article about Biden ordering the destruction, the blowing up of the Nordstream pipelines. 3 of the 4 pipelines that were feeding Germany with cheap natural gas, which Germany was then able to actually resell excess gas to the rest of Europe and to create a profit. And the U.S. cannot have this, of course. And this is a lot of in the article is not just about blowing up the pipeline, but it's explaining the reasoning and the thought process from Germany to the Norwegians to, of course, Biden, the USA, and the people involved in the defense and money sectors of the USA. So now we're going to go into the planning phase. Again, here I am at Seymour Hersh Substack. Sorry, guys, right there. You can go read it for yourself. It's a long article, and you can see I'm just about that far down on the scrolling. So let's get into the planning, guys. I'll read it to you. Again, if you missed part 1, where I read the first introduction and talking about how Germany was using the natural gas and what the history was, Vietnam as an example, and how the Norwegians were intertwined in the U.S. and NATO plan. So go back to part 1. Okay, let's continue on. Part 2, the planning. In December of 2021, 2 months before the first Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, Jake Sullivan convened a meeting of a newly formed task force, men and women from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, and the State Treasury Departments, and asked for recommendations about how to respond to Putin's impending invasion. It would be the first of a series of top-secret meetings in a secure room on a top floor of the old executive office building adjacent to the White House that was also the home of President's Foreign Intelligence Advisor Board, PFIAB. There was the usual back-and-forth chatter that eventually led to a crucial preliminary question. Would the recommendation forwarded by the group to the president be reversible, such as another layer of sanctions and currency restrictions, or irreversibly, that is, kinetic action, which could not be undone? That's the key word there, not just a sanction. What can't be undone? Nord Stream. What became clear to participants, according to the source with direct knowledge of the process, is that Sullivan intended for the group to come up with a plan for the destruction of the 2 Nord Stream pipelines, and that he was delivering on the desires of the president. Over the next several meetings, the participants debated options for an attack. The Navy proposed using a newly commissioned submarine to assault the pipeline directly. The Air Force discussed dropping bombs with delayed fuses that could be set off remotely. The CIA argued that whatever was done, it would have to be covert. Everyone involved understood the stakes. This is not kiddie stuff, the source said. If the attack were traceable to the United States, it's an act of war. It certainly is. It's a terrorist act as well. At the time, CIA was directed by William Burns, a mild-mannered former ambassador to Russia who had served as Deputy Secretary of State in the Obama administration. Burns quickly authorized an agency working group whose ad hoc members included, by chance, someone who was familiar with the capabilities of the Navy's deep-sea divers in Panama City. Over the next few weeks, members of the CIA's working group began to craft a plan for a covert operation that would use deep-sea divers to trigger an explosion along the pipeline. Something like this had been done before in 1971. The American intelligence community learned from still undisclosed sources that 2 important units of the Russian Navy were communicating via an undersea cable buried in the Sea of Okhotsk on Russia's far east coast. The cable linked a regional Navy command to the mainland headquarters in Vladivostok. A hand-picked team of Central Intelligence Agency and National Security Agency operatives was assembled somewhere in the Washington area under deep cover and worked out a plan using Navy divers, modified submarines, and a deep submarine rescue vehicle that succeeded after much trial and error in locating the Russian cable. The divers planted a sophisticated listening device on the cable that successfully intercepted the Russian traffic and recorded on a taping machine. The NSA learned that senior Russian Navy officers, convinced of the security of their communication link, chatted away with their peers without encryption. The recording device and its tape had to be replaced monthly, and the project rolled on merely for a decade until it was compromised by a 44-year-old civilian NSA technician named Roland Pelton, who was fluent in Russian. Pelton was betrayed by a Russian defector in 1985 and sentenced to prison. He was paid just $5,000 by the Russians for his revelations about the operation, along with $35,000 for other Russian operational data he provided that was never made public. Wow, some interesting history. The underwater success, codenamed Ivy Bells, was innovative and risky and produced invaluable intelligence about the Russian Navy's intention and planning. Still, the interagency group was initially skeptical of the CIA's enthusiasm for a covert deep-sea attack. There were too many unanswered questions. The waters of the Baltic Sea were heavily patrolled by the Russian Navy, and there were no oil rigs that could be used as cover for a diving operation. Would the divers have to go to Estonia, right across the border from Russia's natural gas loading docks, to train for the mission? It would be a goat fuck, the agency was told. Throughout all of this scheming, the source said some working guys in the CIA and the State Department were saying, "Don't do this, it's stupid, and will be a political nightmare if it comes out." Nevertheless, in early 2002, the CIA working group reported back to Sullivan's interagency group, "We have a way to blow up the pipelines." What came next was stunning. On February 7th, less than 3 weeks before the seemingly inevitable Russian invasion of Ukraine, Biden met in his White House office with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who, after some wobbling, was now firmly on the American team. At the press briefing that followed, Biden definitely said, "If Russia invades, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it." There's that super quote that I saw before, and I've seen the video of it. Let me see if I can find it.
Is that just an excuse for Germany maybe to not support the SWIFT measures?
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
But how will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Thank you very much for your question. I want to be absolutely clear.
Well, there you have it. Loud and clear. We will put an end to the Nord Stream pipeline. We can get it done. Doesn't matter who has control of the pipeline. So, okay. That's a huge key to this all. And then Victoria Nuland says the same thing. She reaffirms it as well. I don't know if you'll have that video in front of us, but let's continue with the reading. Where was it? Okay, back to where I was. 20 days earlier, Undersecretary Nuland had delivered essentially the same message to a State Department briefing with little press coverage. "I want to be very clear to you today," she said in response to a question. "If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward." Boom. That is a quote from Nuland, and there's video footage of that as well, which I have posted like a year ago. In fact, Romeo put me onto that a long time ago. Never mind. I'm maybe mixing up something else with it. Other Victoria Nuland stuff from the past about the coup, but because this is not that long ago. Several of those involved in planning the pipeline mission were dismayed by what they viewed as indirect reference to the attack. "It was like putting an atomic bomb on the ground in Tokyo and telling the Japanese that we were going to detonate it," said source. The plan was for the option to be executed post-invasion and not advertised publicly. Biden simply didn't get it or ignored it, end quote. Biden's and Nuland's indiscretion, if that is what it was, might have frustrated some of the planners. Oh, wow. Yeah, exactly. These guys, the CIA is like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, he's so senile that he just gave away the plan of the covert plan. Okay, some have frustrated some of the planners, but it also created an opportunity, according to the source. Some of the senior officials of the CIA determined that blowing up the pipelines no longer could be considered a covert option because the president just announced that we knew how to do it. Wow. The plan to blow up Nordstream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation requiring the Congress to be informed to one that was deemed as a highly classified intelligence operation with U.S. military support. Under the law, the source explained, there was no longer a legal requirement to report the operation to Congress. All they had to do now is just do it, but it still had to be secret. The Russians have superlative surveillance of the Baltic Sea. The agency working group members had no direct contact with the White House and were eager to find out if the president meant what he said. That is, if the mission was now a go, the source recalled. Bill Burns come back and says, do it. Okay, so that's the planning section in the article from Seymour Hersh. This is part 2 of the Seymour Hersh article. And the next, we'll have part 3 is the operation. There you have the operation. We'll get into this in part 3. Norway was the perfect place to base the mission, guys. So, yeah. And then from the operation, it goes into the fallout. And that'll be it. So we have the fallout, 2 more parts. So this will be a 4-part series on the Seymour Hersh on his Substack, reading his article, guys. Ernie Racing News. I got other stuff to attend to right now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 3, the operation.